The old warrior had not spoken in 3 days. He sat in his medical pod, staring at nothing, his scarred face empty of emotion. The young historian waited patiently with her recording device ready. "You want to know about humans," Dralveth finally said. His voice was rough like broken stone. "Everyone does. But nobody wants the truth." Pella leaned forward. "The Galactic Council needs your testimony, Commander. You are one of the few who fought them and lived." Dralveth laughed. It was not a happy sound. "I did not live. I survived. There is a difference." He closed his 4 eyes and let his mind travel back 3 cycles. Back to when he was young and stupid and certain of victory. The Corvani High Command had called it Operation Swiftblade. Intelligence reports showed a small human colony on a world they called New Adelaide. 50,000 civilians. 1 military garrison. Minimal orbital defense. The perfect target. Dralveth had commanded 400 elite warriors. He was proud of them. Each one had killed before. Each one was ready to kill again. They were part of a larger force of 6,000 soldiers carried by 12 warships. Against farmers and shopkeepers, it seemed like sending a mountain to crush an insect. "We will be home within 10 rotations, the fleet commander had promised. "The humans will surrender when they see our strength. All primitive species do." Dralveth had believed him. Why would he not? The Corvani Empire had conquered 11 species. They had never lost a war. They had never met an enemy they could not break. On the transport ship, Dralveth reviewed the data files on humans. They were soft creatures. No natural armor. No claws worth mentioning. They needed to breathe a specific mixture of gases. They could only see in a narrow band of light. On paper, they were unremarkable in every way. A junior officer named Breath had approached him during the journey. The young soldier was nervous. "Commander, have you seen the behavioral reports on humans?" Dralveth had not. He did not care about behavior. He cared about weapons and numbers. "Their unpredictability rating is higher than any species on record," Breath continued. "The analysts cannot create reliable models for how they will react to invasion. They will react like everyone else," Dralveth had answered. "They will run, hide, and eventually surrender. That is what prey does." Breath had not looked convinced, but he said nothing more. The fleet dropped out of hyperspace above New Adelaide on a clear morning. The planet was beautiful. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds drifting over peaceful farmland. It looked soft and gentle, just like the creatures who lived there. Sensors confirmed everything intelligence had promised. A handful of defense satellites. A single garrison with perhaps 200 soldiers. No warships. No significant weapons platforms. The humans had built their colony for farming, not fighting. "They must know we are here," the fleet commander said. "Why have they not contacted us to negotiate?" The answer came moments later. A transmission burst from the surface on an open channel. Every ship in the fleet received it. A human female appeared on screen. She wore simple military clothing and had dark hair cut short. Her face was calm, but her eyes held something Dralveth did not recognize. Not fear, not anger, something else. "Attention Corvani fleet," she said. "This is Captain Nadia Reyes of the New Adelaide Defense Force. We have monitored your approach. We know why you are here." She paused and seemed to look directly at Dralveth through the screen. "You want our world. We understand. Many have wanted things from humanity before. Some have tried to take them." She smiled, and there was no warmth in it. "None of them are still trying." The transmission ended. The fleet commander laughed. "Brave words from a species that brings farmers to a war. Begin the invasion." Dralveth gave the order to his troops. The landing craft launched. 400 warriors descended toward the surface, toward what they believed would be easy victory. As they fell through the atmosphere, Dralveth noticed something strange. The colony's emergency beacon had activated. Every ship could see the signal screaming into space. But it was not a distress call. It was not asking for evacuation or rescue. "What does that transmission say?" Dralveth asked his communications officer. The officer listened, then looked up with confusion on his face. "It is a single phrase, Commander," repeating over and over. "What phrase?" "They are coming. Hold the line." Dralveth did not understand. Hold what line? Against what? They were just farmers. Below, the green fields of New Adelaide waited. They looked so peaceful, so harmless that Dralveth would spend the rest of his life wishing he had turned back in that moment. But he did not. The landing craft touched down on alien soil, and the doors opened. and 400 Corvani warriors stepped out into what they believed would be a simple conquest. They were wrong. They were so very wrong. Silence greeted them. That was the first wrong thing that Dralveth led his warriors through golden fields of grain that swayed in a gentle wind. The sun was warm. Birds sang in the distance. It was peaceful. It was beautiful. It made his scales itch with unease. Where are the people? Breath asked quietly. The question hung in the air. Intelligence said 50,000 humans lived here. The landing zone was near their largest settlement, a town called Bridgewater. They should have seen someone by now. Panicked civilians. Fleeing families. Something. Instead, there was nothing. Empty roads. Abandoned vehicles. Houses with doors hanging open. The humans had simply vanished. They are hiding, Dralveth decided. Cowards. Flush them out. His warriors spread across the farmland in standard search formation. They moved with confidence. They expected to find humans cowering in basements and barns, ready to surrender. The first shot came from a grain silo 200 meters away that a Corvani soldier dropped. A hole burned through his chest armor. Before anyone could react, more shots followed from different directions. Trees, buildings, ditches. The humans had not run. They had dug in. Contact. Multiple directions, someone shouted as Dralveth took cover behind a farming vehicle. His mind raced to process what was happening. These were not military weapons. The shots were too weak, too slow. These were hunting tools, tools for killing animals, and yet his soldiers were dying. The farmers fought like nothing Dralveth had ever seen. An old human male drove a massive harvesting machine directly into a squad of warriors. The blades tore through armor like paper. 12 soldiers died before someone managed to destroy the vehicle. The driver never tried to escape. He was still pressing forward when he died that a human woman ran from a building carrying something in her arms. Dralveth ordered his soldiers to stop her. She was heading toward a large storage tank. His warriors raised their weapons. The woman smiled at them. Then she triggered the explosive in her hands. The fuel storage erupted in a ball of fire that reached into the sky. 30 Corvani soldiers were consumed in the blast. The woman had killed herself to take them with her. What is wrong with these creatures? A soldier screamed. Dralveth had no answer. In 11 wars against 11 species, he had never seen this. Civilians were supposed to flee or surrender. They were supposed to protect themselves and their families. They were not supposed to fight. They were not supposed to sacrifice themselves. The battle for the farmland lasted until sunset. 400 elite Corvani warriors against farmers, shopkeepers, and retirees. By the time darkness fell, 200 of his soldiers were dead or wounded. They had captured nothing but empty fields. Captain Reyes broadcast another message as night arrived. Her voice was calm, almost friendly. "Welcome to New Adelaide," she said. "You have taken some of our farmland. Congratulations. Tomorrow we will take it back. The day after, we will take more. We will keep taking until you leave or until you kill every single one of us. There is no third option. Sleep well." Dralveth made camp in a bombed-out barn. His remaining soldiers were shaken. They had trained for war against armies. They had not trained for war against grandmothers with explosives that eye in the darkness. Something strange reached his ears. At first, he thought it was a malfunction in his audio implants. But no, the sound was real. Singing. Humans singing. Somewhere out in the night, the defenders were singing together. Many voices joined as one, rising and falling in patterns Dralveth did not understand. The sound was beautiful. It was also terrifying in a way he could not explain. He called over his translator, a young specialist who had studied human culture. "What are they singing about?" The translator listened. His face grew pale under his scales. "It is called an anthem, Commander, a song of their people. The words speak of standing together, of never retreating, of fighting until death takes them, and then fighting still." "That is not possible," Dralveth said. "You cannot fight after death." The translator shook his head. "I do not think they mean it literally, Commander. I think they mean that even if they die, the next human will continue. And the next, and the next, forever." Dralveth listened to the singing voices floating across the dark fields. 200 of his best soldiers were dead, killed by farmers. And now those farmers were singing about eternal resistance. For the first time in his military career, Dralveth felt something cold in his chest. It was doubt. He looked up at the stars and wondered what kind of creatures these humans truly were. What kind of species sang songs about death and refused to stop fighting even when they should have lost? The singing continued through the night. Dralveth did not sleep. Neither did any of his soldiers. When morning came, they would learn that the singing had served a purpose. While they listened, the humans had been moving, repositioning, preparing. The real battle had not even begun. 3 days into the invasion, Dralveth sat in a ruined farmhouse and tried to understand his enemy. The prisoner across from him was young, barely an adult by human standards. His name was Danny, and he had been captured while trying to plant explosives under a Corvani transport vehicle. He should have been terrified. He should have been begging for his life. Instead, he was laughing. "You really do not understand, do you?" Danny said. His hands were bound, but his spirit was not. "You think this is something new for us. You think we have never faced impossible odds before. You will tell me your defense positions," Dralveth replied calmly. "You will tell me how many fighters remain. You will cooperate, or you will suffer." Danny leaned forward. Blood dripped from a cut above his eye, but he smiled like he held all the power in the room. "We have been fighting each other for 10,000 years, he said. "We invented war. We perfected it. We have killed millions of our own kind over pieces of land, over ideas, over words written in old books. You are not special. You are just the next enemy. There will always be a next enemy, and we will always fight." Dralveth struck him. Danny spat blood and laughed again. "My grandmother killed more of your soldiers than I did," Danny said. "She was 63 years old. She drove her truck into your formation and did not stop until your weapons melted the engine. She died smiling. That is what you are fighting against. That is what you cannot beat." The interrogation gave Dralveth nothing useful, but it gave him something worse. It gave him understanding that he remembered the conquest of the Velish people 8 cycles ago. The Velish were gentle, artistic. Their cities were full of music and beauty. When the Corvani fleet appeared above their homeworld, their leaders came aboard to negotiate surrender within hours. They gave up their planet to save their people. It was logical. It was sensible. It was what any rational species would do. The humans were not rational. Day brought new horrors. Captain Reyes led a night attack that should have been impossible. 40 humans crept through Corvani defensive lines without being detected. They destroyed the command vehicle, killed 17 officers, and vanished back into the darkness. Dralveth's second-in-command died with a human blade in his throat. The tactics made no sense. The humans sacrificed positions to create traps. They used their own wounded as bait. Children served as scouts and messengers, running through firefights with no fear on their faces. They attacked supply lines, poisoned water sources, and burned their own crops rather than let the Corvani use them. "They are insane," Breath whispered after another failed assault. "This is not warfare. This is madness." But Dralveth was beginning to see the pattern. The humans were not insane. They had simply accepted something that no Corvani could accept. They had accepted that they might lose. They had accepted that they might die. And they had decided that dying was acceptable as long as they made the enemy pay for every step forward. On the 5th day, something happened that broke Dralveth's understanding completely. His soldiers captured a human medic. She was small, young, wearing white clothing marked with a red symbol. The Corvani found her in an unusual situation. She had been dragging a wounded Corvani soldier toward cover. One of the enemy. She had been trying to save him. They brought her to Dralveth, expecting him to interrogate her. But he only had one question. "What?" The medic looked at him with tired eyes. "Why what? Why did you try to save my soldier? We are your enemies. We are killing your people. Why would you help one of us?" She was quiet for a moment. Then she shrugged like the answer was obvious. "He was screaming," she said simply. "He was in pain. I could not just leave him there." Dralveth stared at her. This creature had watched her friends die. Her home was burning. Her people were being slaughtered. And she stopped to help a wounded enemy because he was screaming. "You are either the most foolish species in the galaxy," he said slowly, "or the most dangerous." "Maybe both," she replied. That night, the fleet commander ordered orbital bombardment of civilian areas. It was a standard tactic. Destroy enough buildings, kill enough innocents, and any species would surrender to stop the suffering. The humans did not surrender. Instead, they broadcast footage of the destruction across the galactic network. Ships in 100 systems received images of burning homes, dead children, screaming survivors. The message was simple. Look what the Corvani do. Look what kind of enemy they are. Within hours, condemnation messages arrived from 12 council species. The Corvani Empire had made themselves into villains. The humans had turned their own suffering into a weapon. And then, on day 6, the sensors detected new signatures entering the system. Dralveth expected warships, reinforcements, the human military arriving to save their colony. What he saw instead was worse: cargo ships, passenger vessels, civilian transports, hundreds of them, emerging from hyperspace in a ragged swarm. "Commander," the sensor officer said, his voice shaking. "Those ships are coming from 12 different human worlds. They are filled with people, just people, volunteers, ordinary humans from across their territory, climbing into any ship they could find, traveling across the stars to fight for strangers they had never met." Dralveth watched them coming and felt the cold doubt in his chest grow into something worse: fear. The volunteer ships landed in a valley beyond Corvani artillery range. Within hours, thousands of humans poured out onto the soil of New Adelaide. They carried whatever weapons they could find. Some had military equipment stolen or borrowed from their home worlds. Others had hunting rifles, tools, or nothing at all. Dralveth watched the sensor data with growing disbelief. These were not soldiers. The biometric scans told the story. Teachers, factory workers, shop owners, students, medical workers, parents, grandparents, all of them traveling across the void to die for people they had never met. Why? He asked the empty room. It was the only question that mattered now. Why would anyone do this? Day 7 brought the answer in blood. A bridge outside Bridgewater became the focus of battle. The Corvani needed it to advance. The humans needed to hold it. What should have been a simple military objective became a nightmare. An old human named George led the defense. Dralveth learned his name later from captured communications. George was 64 years old. He had been a history teacher before retiring. He had traveled 3 weeks through hyperspace to reach New Adelaide. George and 19 other volunteers held that bridge for 6 hours against 200 Corvani soldiers. They used improvised barricades, homemade explosives, and weapons so old they belonged in museums. One by one they fell. George was the last, firing until his weapon melted from overuse. When Corvani soldiers finally crossed the bridge, they found George's body slumped against a barrier. In his hand was a small device playing recorded music, the same song the defenders had sung on the first night. "What kind of creature travels across the stars to die on a bridge?" Breath asked. Dralveth had no answer. He began interviewing the captured volunteers, not for intelligence, not for tactical advantage, just to understand. The answers destroyed everything he thought he knew about the universe. "Why did you come here?" A factory worker from a world called Haven shrugged. "Because they are human. Same as me. Could not sit at home watching the feeds while my people died. You do not know anyone on this planet. Does not matter. They needed help." A young woman, barely 20 years old, gave a different answer. "My great-grandmother survived something called the Holocaust. Millions of our people were killed because nobody came to help them. I promised myself I would never let that happen to anyone else. Ever." Dralveth did not understand what a Holocaust was. When he researched it later, he wished he had not. The turning point came on day 8. A young human, a mechanic who had arrived with the volunteer fleet, saw a Corvani grenade land in the middle of his squad. Without hesitation, he threw himself on top of it. The explosion killed him instantly. The others survived. Dralveth heard about it from a survivor they captured. The Corvani soldier was shaking. He did not even pause, the soldier reported. He saw the weapon and covered it with his body. He had known those people for 3 days. 3 days. And he died for them without thinking. In Corvani culture, self-sacrifice was rare. Warriors fought for glory, for territory, for the empire. They did not simply throw their lives away for strangers. The concept was not just foreign. It was incomprehensible. On day 9, Captain Reyes was captured during a failed counterattack. Her squad was ambushed. Most died fighting. She ran out of ammunition and was taken alive. Dralveth interrogated her personally. She was wounded, exhausted, and beaten. She should have been broken. Instead, she looked at him with clear eyes and answered every question calmly. "You cannot win," he told her. "We have more soldiers, more weapons, more ships. You are prolonging the inevitable." Reyes smiled. It was the same smile she had worn in her first broadcast. cold and certain. "You are probably right," she said. "We knew that when we started. We never expected to win. Then why fight? Because that is what humans do. We hold the line. We buy time. Not for victory. For hope. For the chance that something changes. For the people who come after us. You are willing to die for a chance. We are willing to die for each other. For strangers. For people who have not been born yet. That is the difference between us." She leaned forward despite her wounds. "You fight to conquer. We fight to protect. You will never understand us. And that is why you will never beat us." Dralveth stared at her for a long time. Then he stood and walked out of the room. That night, the fleet commander sent new orders. The invasion had become too costly. Galactic opinion had turned against the Corvani Empire. Reinforcements would not be coming. The order was simple and clear. "Withdraw." Dralveth read the message 3 times. 6,000 soldiers had come to conquer a farming colony. Fewer than 1,000 would leave. They had lost to farmers, teachers, mechanics, and grandparents who refused to stop fighting. He should have felt relief. The nightmare was ending. But as he prepared his soldiers for evacuation, Dralveth knew the truth. This battle would never end. Not really. He would carry it with him forever. He would see those singing voices in the dark. He would remember the medic who saved enemies and the old teacher who died on a bridge. The humans had beaten him. Not with weapons. Not with tactics. With something far more terrifying. With love. The evacuation zone was a flat field 3 kilometers from the burning remains of Bridgewater. Dralveth stood in the morning mist, watching his broken soldiers gather. They moved slowly. Wounded helping wounded. Eyes empty. Spirits crushed. 800 survivors from 6,000. The mathematics of defeat. "Shuttles will arrive in 4 hours, Breath reported. His voice was hollow. "The fleet is moving to extraction position." Dralveth nodded, but said nothing. For hours. They only needed to hold this position for 4 hours. Then they could leave this nightmare world forever. The humans would not give them 4 peaceful hours. He knew that already. They came with the sunrise. Not a massive army. Not overwhelming force. Just humans. Hundreds of them pouring out of the hills and ruins, carrying whatever weapons they had left. Their bodies were broken. Their resources were exhausted. They had lost nearly as many people as the Corvani, but they kept coming. Defensive positions. Dralveth roared. His soldiers formed a perimeter around the landing zone. They were elite warriors, the best the Empire had produced. But their hands shook as they raised their weapons. They had seen too much. They had learned what humans could do. The first wave hit the northern line. Humans charged through open ground with no regard for their own lives. They fell by the dozens, but more followed. Always more. An endless tide of screaming, bleeding, determined creatures who refused to accept defeat. Dralveth found himself fighting alongside his soldiers for the first time. Not commanding from behind. Not watching through sensors. Fighting. Killing. Bleeding. A human man rushed at him with a broken piece of metal. Dralveth cut him down. Another took his place. Then another. They were not skilled fighters. They were not trained warriors. But they did not stop. They never stopped. The battle became a blur of violence and noise. Dralveth lost track of time. He lost track of his soldiers. He lost track of everything except the next human trying to kill him and the next moment of survival. A young woman appeared from the smoke. She was small and thin, barely old enough to be called an adult. Her weapon was a metal pipe taken from broken machinery. She screamed something in her language and charged at Dralveth was faster. He was stronger. He was trained. His blade found her chest before she could swing her pipe. She fell at his feet, gasping, dying, and still trying to reach him with her bare hands. That he stood over her body as the fighting continued around him. She had known she would lose. She had known she would die. She had attacked anyway. Slowly, with hands that felt like they belonged to someone else, Dralveth searched her clothing. In a pocket near her heart, he found a small flat object. A photograph. The image showed a family. A man and woman smiling. 2 children laughing. A home in the background with flowers growing near the door. A life. A whole life captured in a single picture. She had left that life behind. She had traveled across the stars. She had charged a Corvani commander with a metal pipe. For strangers. For people she would never know. Dralveth put the photograph in his own pocket. He did not know why. The shuttles came 3 hours later. The Corvani fell back toward them in ragged groups, leaving their dead behind. The humans pressed the attack until the last moment, killing and dying right up to the edge of the landing zone. Dralveth was the last to board. He dragged 2 wounded soldiers up the ramp while weapons fire cracked around him. The shuttle lifted off, and he collapsed against the wall, breathing hard. Through the viewport, he watched New Adelaide shrink below. The humans were still fighting, still shooting at the retreating shuttles, still screaming their defiance at the sky. Then he saw something that made him pause. A human soldier stood at the edge of the battlefield, weapon raised, with a clear shot at the shuttle viewport. At Dralveth, their eyes met across the distance. A moment stretched into forever. The human lowered his weapon. He did not fire. He just watched the shuttle rise and turned away. Dralveth did not understand. He had killed that human's friends. His family, perhaps. He had burned his world. And the human had chosen not to take revenge when revenge was possible. "Commander," Breath asked, "are you injured?" Dralveth looked at the young officer, looked at the wounded soldiers around him, looked at the shrinking world below where humans were already beginning to rebuild, even before the shuttle engines had cooled. "We lost," he said quietly. "We are retreating," Breath corrected. "We did not lose. We lost." Dralveth's voice was hard and final. "We lost to farmers. We lost to teachers and mechanics and grandparents. We lost to creatures who fight with metal pipes and die smiling." He leaned back and closed his eyes. "We lost, and we will never fight them again. Because if we do, they will keep coming. Forever. Until every human in the galaxy is dead or every Corvani is." The shuttle carried them toward the fleet. Behind them, smoke rose from New Adelaide, and somewhere in the ruins, humans were already singing again. The Galactic Council chamber was vast. Representatives from 40 species filled the curved seating, their many eyes focused on the lone figure standing at the central platform. Dralveth felt small under their attention. Old, broken, but he had a truth to tell, and they needed to hear it. "You have called me here to discuss humanity," he began. His voice echoed through the chamber. "You want to know if they should be admitted to the council. You want to know if they can be trusted, if they are safe." He paused, letting the silence build. "Many of you believe humans are too violent, too unpredictable, too dangerous." He looked around at the assembled delegates. "You are correct. Humans are all of these things. They are the most dangerous species I have ever encountered." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Several delegates nodded with satisfaction, already preparing arguments against human membership. "But not for the reasons you think." Dralveth activated the display system. Images appeared above him. The farmland of New Adelaide. The burning buildings. The endless waves of human fighters charging into certain death. "We invaded their world with 6,000 soldiers. Elite warriors. The finest the Corvani Empire could produce. We faced farmers, shopkeepers, teachers, grandparents." He let the words sink in. "Fewer than 800 of us survived." Shocked silence filled the chamber. "We lost because we did not understand what we were fighting. We thought we were fighting for territory, for resources, for dominance." He shook his head slowly. The humans were fighting for each other. New images appeared. The volunteer fleet. Thousands of civilian ships arriving from across human space. These people traveled for weeks through dangerous space to fight for strangers. They had no military training, no proper weapons, no hope of survival. They came anyway. They came because other humans needed help. His voice hardened. "Tell me, honored delegates, would any of your species do the same?" No one answered. "I captured many humans during the battle. I interrogated them. I tried to understand their motivation." Dralveth reached into his uniform and pulled out the photograph he had taken from the young woman. The family portrait, worn from handling. "This belonged to a human female I killed. She attacked me with a metal pipe. She knew she would die. She attacked anyway. For people she had never met. For a world that was not her home." He held up the photograph. "She left this family behind. Husband, children, a life. She gave it all up because someone else needed help." He put the photograph away. "I also captured a human medic. I found her dragging one of my wounded soldiers to safety. The enemy. She was saving the enemy." He let out a breath. When I asked why, she said she could not leave him screaming. She could not let anyone suffer if she could help. Even the people trying to kill her. Dralveth stepped forward. "You want to know if humans are dangerous?" "Yes, they are. They are dangerous because they will fight forever. They will die for principles. They will sacrifice themselves for strangers. They will never surrender as long as one human remains standing. He looked around the chamber. You cannot defeat that. No one can defeat that. He paused. But here is the truth you need to understand. That same quality that makes humans terrifying enemies makes them invaluable allies. They do not just fight for their own kind. They fight for anyone who needs them, anyone who asks for help, anyone who is screaming in pain and cannot help themselves. The chamber was silent. I ask you this question, honored delegates. Would you rather have humanity as your enemy, knowing they will never stop fighting until one side is completely destroyed? Or would you rather have them as your ally, knowing they will stand beside you against any threat, die for you without hesitation, and never abandon you no matter the cost? Dralveth stepped back. That is the truth about humans. That is what I learned on New Adelaide. They are monsters and angels combined into one species. They will burn worlds and then weep for their enemies. They will fight to the death and then forgive you for making them do it. He bowed his head. I have nothing more to say. The council debated for 3 hours. Dralveth waited in a side chamber, too tired to care about the outcome. He had spoken the truth. The rest was not his responsibility. When the vote came, it was not close. Humanity was granted provisional membership in the Galactic Council. The first species admitted after making war against a member state. 10 cycles passed. Dralveth lived quietly on a small Corvani colony, far from politics and war. He tended a garden. He watched the sky. He tried to forget. One morning, a message arrived from an unknown sender. No text, just an image file. He opened it and stared for a long time. New Adelaide. Rebuilt. Thriving. Golden fields under a blue sky. New buildings where ruins had stood. Children playing in streets that had once run with blood. In the foreground stood a young human girl, perhaps 7 years old. She wore a pendant around her neck, made from Corvani metal, salvaged from the invasion, shaped into something beautiful. The message had one line of text. We remember, but we forgive. That is what we do. Dralveth saved the message to his personal archive. He read it every morning when he woke. He read it every night before he slept. Humans were terrifying. Humans were impossible. Humans were the most dangerous species in the galaxy. And somehow, against all reason, they were also the most beautiful. That he never deleted that message. That he never would.